cardigan out of some of Sally Fox's color organic grown cotton, and then Rebecca dyed 2 of the strands in the indigo that she had raised and had in her fermentation vat. Oh, it just told me no. Let me find my arrow.
That's that boom sound we told you
Oh,
about.
I can't find my arrow. Where's
Don't
the
worry.
arrow?
I love that Will's just
Here, I'll block my husband.
Will, no, thanks, Will.
Where's the arrow?
It's kind of bottom left. Or sometimes if you just hit the space bar.
I'll hit it again. No, it's yelling at me.
And it'll pop up.
Do I need to minimize the screen? Oh my God, what is happening?
Don't worry.
Okay, I'm gonna let me do escape and I'll see if I can start over. Nope.
Okay. What if you hit the arrows, Heidi, on your keyboard?
It's all yelling at me.
Maybe someone can admit whoever's in the waiting room and then we'll go.
Oh, I got it. I got that. Don't worry.
Yeah. If I minimize. Nope.
Like my husband says, always like, once you escape, just get out, like stop share, and then come back in and start over.
My screen totally froze. Okay, well, I'll talk and we'll mess around with that, and you can watch my husband poke at my computer. Very exciting. So with meeting Rebecca and being introduced to the Fibershed, it was sort of this whole new world for me. And at the time I was mostly knitting and doing,
You can use that.
I can just tap this.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. I think we figured it out. So like I said, I was mostly designing knitting patterns and hand knitting sweaters. And I got teamed up with 2 different farmers, because that was kind of part of what we were doing, was we were matching designers with farmers to help sort of promote what they were making and kind of like help them with their businesses. And so I teamed up with Mary Petit Sarli, who is Twirl Yarn. She's in Napa. And then Sally Fox, who has this amazing color organic cotton and beautiful merino wool. And those are some of the patterns. And and Sally Fox is in the Cape Valley. As I was like knitting and designing patterns, I really wanted to make a zero waste clothing line. And so I started with, on the left is Sally Fox's color organic cotton that was milled in Japan. And then the other thing I was using was industry waste from a clothing line that was being produced in San Francisco, and also a luxury bed linen company that would donate their dead stock to a local little charity shop called The Legacy, which is like the most amazing like used craft store you could ever have. And so they would like donate bolts and scraps, and so I would go and buy them there, and then all that money goes to the Sebastopol Senior Center, which I love because it's just sort of just makes our communities better, which is super important to me. Oh, and this, I wanted to include this slide because this is Osage orange sawdust that I got from Botanical Colors on cotton. And I pretty much solely work with cellulose fibers. So it's like cotton and linen. I did some hemp, but hemp is really hard to get good colors on. And so I sort of like stopped using it for right now. But if you ever want to get a really good yellow with Osage orange, you end up mordenting it twice and dyeing it twice. So you mordant, dye, wash, mordant, dye, wash, and you get this, which is like sunshine. Then I started teaching mending classes, and I had a friend who had a local embroidery and yarn shop, and she's like, please come and teach. And she's like, and can you please naturally dye cotton thread? And I was like, oh yes, like why haven't I already been doing that? And so the slip on the right is from my clothing line, and I had torn it, and that was also dyed with Rubia tinctora madder extract from Botanical Colors. And the center thread pictures are the very first thread I dyed, which was this beautiful antique cotton thread. And then most of the thread I dyed in the beginning was from the charity shop. But because of COVID, that sort of, they were really open infrequently because everyone was high risk. And so I bought like everything I could when I could. And then it's now been supplemented from like, just buying new. And then the slip on the right is the very first pattern I ever drafted. And I wore that slip until it basically disintegrated. And throughout shelter in place, I have mended it. And as of 2 weeks ago, it is entirely boro stitched. Let's see. Oh, and then, so we'll just start with, this is now the natural dye quilt. And that's some of the trees in my forest. That's just outside my studio. On the property where I live is where my studio is. I have like a 1,000-foot commute, which is very, very handy. But so kind of going back to like my influence from the Fibershed, I always wanted to do a quilt that recorded the plants that were around me. And I would always work on this list of, I think I have like about 30 plants I have access to, of like trees and shrubs and whatnot. The quilt block right here is a combination of pomegranate husks, which I can get from the farm. The only cheat color is in the bottom, which is that really bright yellow green. And that's actually from a silk tree that's in Occidental, which is the closest town. It's about 3 miles away. And then I have oak gall and a little bit of, I think, eucalyptus and some hazelnut. The other thing that I did once shelter in place started, like everybody, I panicked. And then I kind of was like, well, I have to look at this as this amazing opportunity, right? And I need a really positive distraction from what is going on. And in my mending classes, I was also doing these little pouch patterns that people could use their scraps, or if somebody didn't want to necessarily do a garment, but they still wanted to learn the technique, I had this like small little pattern that they could do. And so what I did was I put the patterns up for free on my website so people could download them. And then I also was really like, man, I've been teaching. Like I had classes booked out for like 3 months and I was like planning more classes. And so, all that gets canceled. I'm like, how do I teach? How do I teach? Do I do Zoom classes? And I'm like, I don't want to mess with that. I want I need instant gratification. So I started doing Instagram Live, and I would like let people know. I was actually doing them every day in the beginning because it was sort of my sanity, and like to be connected to my creative community. And so we would do these patterns. I did free mending classes. I kind of had a curriculum set up. So I would do sort of stitch alongs, and then I would do mending classes, like simple. And then we got more and more complicated. And then I was also doing my natural dye work simultaneously. And I would share and sort of tell people, how to break down leaves. Because in the very beginning, I was doing it without any mordants and just sort of relying on the tannins in the tree leaves, because I wanted it to be as accessible as possible. And then I started slowly adding in mordants. This is another, you'll see this image a lot in my work. It became my stitch meditation and probably the most important thing for sort of my sanity. And it was the most complicated, and it's the thing that I taught the most. It's actually a super old darning technique called tambourine stitch, and it's really, really hard to find any information on it. And so lots and lots and lots of tutorials on that. And sort of here's some of the dye. Instagram in the middle of everything changed live from being able to save for 24 hours to being able to save directly to IGTV. And so I have lots and lots and lots of tutorials saved that you can go back and watch and just stitch alongs. And then I also did a little series on how to do start your own 1, 2, 3 bat, the shakeolata, because it's super, super easy. And I had a lot of people always ask about indigo and are always kind of afraid of it. And so I did demos and I talked about it. And a lot of people tried indigo bats, which made me really, really happy. But right here is what I started with, which is California Bay Laurel, loquat leaves, hazelnut, I think I have Dyer's Ball mushroom, eucalyptus bark. I'm talking about the clothesline and the pots. And then I've got redwood needles. We did tree work the whole time. We were also doing shelter in place because our friends own the property and they were part of our pod. And we immediately started prepping for fire season. Some of the other things on the clothesline, I think we start sort of, I think there's horsetail in there too, which I got these beautiful pinks from. Yeah, so we have bracken on the left, hazelnut, redwood. No, let's see. Yeah, I think it's hazelnut, redwood, and what else is in there? I think there's some mushroom in there too. It's hard, like I did it so long ago, and unless I have like actually everything labeled, I'm like, what was that? I have a whole sample book that kind of corresponds with everything that I started after seeing Catherine Ellis and getting her book, The Art and Science of Natural Dye. And that sort of shifted me again, where I started doing the gallo tannin and aluminum acetate. Oops, oh no, go back. There we go. Aluminum acetate, and just really got better colors. This is a close-up of the wash and dried samples. I usually post both so people can sort of not expect a shift, but sort of can see how things can change and sort of manage expectations. Because I think that can be really difficult when we do natural dyes. We're like, oh, this is going to be amazing. Oh my God, it totally changed color. And I scour all my fabric. I do the mordenting. After it's done, I always wash it in cold water and dry it. Don't wash in hot water. If you do it by accident, I've done it, you'll lose like half your color. But we have Dyer's Ball mushroom. And this is from like left to right, Dyer's Ball mushroom, redwood, the really sort of dark on top is oak gall. And then on the side is hazelnut. The bottom have no mordant and the top have been mordented. So it's in person, you can really tell the difference a lot more. And there's a little more color saturation, but it's still, gentle color. Here's a good collection. And this was like one of my most sort of exciting experiments that I had. And we have this huge craggy sort of, I call it a wild plum tree because it's both has green leaves, purple leaves, and variegated leaves. And the plums aren't really delicious, but they're not terrible. The baby deer like eating them. But I noticed the biggest color shift, and I had noticed this in, I think, plants like ivy and bracken, where, so what I do as far as like my dye process goes, I'll go gather, and I gather responsibly from different areas. And, I never like strip tree leaves or anything like that. But I'll fill up my dye pot, and the biggest dye pot I'm using is about 20 liters, about like, I think it's like 3 gallons. But I'll fill that halfway up with sort of really packed matter and or plant matter. And if the leaves are really thick, I cut them up. And I'll bring that up to about 180 to 200 degrees. I don't usually boil. And then I'll cram some fabric, some on the top and then some in between, and I'll let it cool. And after about 12 hours, I'll take it out, and then I will reheat the pot, cram more fabric in it, let it sit for another like 12 or 24 hours, pull that fabric out, and then I'll strain the plant matter and put in my mordented fabric. And so what I noticed with the wild plum is, so if you look at the left, I think it's a little bit easier to tell. First, I got sort of this sort of like gray, purple, green. And then the next round, I got these more olivey colors. And then, of course, once I added the mordant, I got these sort of yellowy, mango-y tones. And that is like the one other thing that I noticed is a lot of my tree leaves gave me pinks, which I didn't expect. And then once I mordanted them, then I tended to get more of the yellow tones, which sometimes they were very peachy and sometimes they were very kind of more like mango. And then the slide below is fallen maple leaves that I gathered on one of the days during the lightning complex fire when we actually had air we could breathe. Yeah, and so everything you see is, I have silk charmeuse, which is always, or most of the time it's mordanted. I think in the beginning I didn't, but in all the now samples, it's been mordanted. And I use a natural linen, sort of a mixed linen that's both natural and bleached, and then a bleached linen and a Kona cotton. And then sometimes whatever scraps I find that I'm like, ooh, I don't know what this is, I'm just gonna stick it in the dye pot. Sometimes it's tencel, like I said, from the bedding company, I have all these pieces of fabric and I don't really know what they are. I just know that they're natural. And I've done burn tests on them. So yeah, the upper middle is fig leaf and Eureka lemon leaves. And the side is just more of the wild plum, because I got really excited and I dyed a lot of fabric. And then I also, at the very end, I put iron in the dye pot and just sort of exhausted it. Here is one of my favorite shots. And I found a California black walnut tree on the property. We also have an English walnut tree. And I didn't find a lot, but I gathered any of the walnut husks I found on the ground, the squirrels left behind. And I did a little bit of walnut dyeing. But so this is mostly the Northern California black walnut, which there are a lot of varieties of walnut, and there's actually both a Southern California and a Northern California walnut. Walnut. And oh, I think you can actually see the walnut husks is the dark brown, and there's a little bit of indigo in there too. But the samples on the right are non-mordanted on the bottom, and then mordanted on the top. And you can see it sort of shifted to more, it's really very much a khaki army color once you mordant it. Ooh, these are the last samples that I did. And so the clothesline, I wanted to show this too, because it's also about managing expectations. I picked up fallen red Japanese maple leaves and fallen torch maple leaves. We mostly have second growth redwoods, but we have dogwoods and a variety of maple trees and just like lots and lots, camellias, rhododendrons, which I did some camellia too, which is really cool. It smells like tea when you're steeping it, because it's part of the tea family, and you get this nice sort of rich yellow from it. But so the Japanese maple leaves at first give you this purple color. And when you wash it, it shifts and it becomes more gray with purple undertones, which is still beautiful, but it's one of those where you're like, oh my God, I just got purple. And then I washed it and it turned gray. And then the next round, it was sort of green. And then it shifted with the mordants. And I think on the end, the pink is the torch maple without mordants, and sort of the yellower tones are with mordant. And I actually, in the fall, I got more green tones from the leaves, and I'm sure it's because of the chemical change when they drop, but also I don't really know because I'm not a scientist. And then the images on the left are 4 different trees, and the orange and pink tones are loquat leaves, which I think probably are my absolute favorite to use. And I did dye work with loquat in the very beginning, and we were in severe drought, and it actually, I got a much broader range of sort of pinks and peaches and oranges over a series of days. It actually took me almost 2 days to really get color out of the leaves. And I think it was just because they were so dry. And then this, what I have here, was basically over 2 days. Just the color just came pouring out, and it's been raining a lot, and it's been kind of cool and really moist, which I think is great. The top left is blue gum eucalyptus, which is from the farm trail. And I noticed it one day when I was walking, and I was a little bit naughty. It was over a fence out of someone's yard. And usually I ask, but I didn't. I just went and I trimmed like a little bit, but I did it really like nicely. But I should have asked permission. It was very bad of me. And below that is the blue gum eucalyptus, which is very invasive, and we have a lot of it because it was planted for windbreaks, but it's also really bad for fires because it is like, you know, just pure fuel. And then the top right is bishop pine cones, which I found on the ground because a truck had broken off branches. And I actually tried to smash them, and even with a 5-pound hammer, dropping it on them, I couldn't smash them. So they're actually still steeping, but this is mordented because without mordant, they really didn't do much. And I'm sure it's just because it's going to take a long time to get any color out. But what I loved about it was I sort of like layered the fabric in between the pine cones, and it left all these pretty little marks. Yeah, and like it's kind of, let's see, the for the blue gum, the top two are mordented and the bottom ones aren't. And the lighter two of the other ones, it's the same, no mordant. So it's just, you usually just get a stronger color, but sometimes there's a massive, massive color shift. Oh, here's some of my indigo and some of my threads. I'm always dyeing thread, but I mostly show pictures of the fabric because you can see the color better. This is more of the direction my clothing line is going to probably go into, but not as heavily altered. The left, of course, is a detail shot. I had this dress in my line that I wore, that I actually made for myself, and I wore it, and it was never, I was just always wanted it to be bigger and softer and cozier. So I just like cut it up the middle, added fabric patches, added walnut and some eucalyptus fabric, and just used a whole bunch of different colors of thread, including indigo, because I was going to over dye it, and I just wanted to see how many different shades of blue I could get. But also, as I wore it, I wanted to see sort of how the indigo colors would evolve, having all these other colors underneath. And I'm actually wearing the dress right now. I pretty much wore it like, it's like my COVID dress. It became like my uniform. I added some madder thread accents afterwards. And this is where I'm at with my quilt project. I have more blocks, but these are the ones that make sense together. And some of them you can still, I'm still stitching on them. And then just to also show you scale, the block that's in the hoop, that's a 14-inch hoop. So they're big, I'm doing big blocks because I'm hand sewing everything. I'm doing a little bit of machine basting just to help hold things in place. But yeah, it's hand sewn. I'm not going to back it. I want people to see the backside because, for one, the backside is gorgeous with all the knots and all the texture, but also I really want people to be able to see the process. The quilt, in the end, we have a small artist in residency space, and in the end, the quilt and the sample book will go into the space so that people can go out, and I'm drawing a map too, marking where all the plants are. So if people want to go out and explore, they can actually have sort of a guide that tells them the colors that are around them, which I think is really cool. And then This is also like one of the pieces I worked on all through Shelter in Place. And it's a 24 by 24 inch vintage kimono collage that I did on an antique French linen pillowcase that I had. And it's a like you can't really see all the colors of thread because the kimono red is just so intense, but there's madder and there's horsetail and there's California bay laurel and there's eucalyptus and I think there's some marigold in there. And I'm doing like more large scale pieces and then smaller sort of color studies of indigo and of just all the natural dye things and sort of making more textile art. Yeah, and then I just like 3 days a week, I do my live cast and we stitch together. That's always Tuesday, Friday, and Sunday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, and 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So yeah, that is Honeyfolk.
Thanks, Heidi.
Oh, did you
I
figure?
like how
There you go. You're back.
I know.
Heidi, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Oh,
That
yay.
was really beautiful. All right. We see you.
Okay, cool.
We hear
Yay.
you. That was a wonderful presentation. Amy, I know you have questions, so why don't you just jump in?
Whoa, you've got a lot. Okay. I'm just going to jump on in. So what is the brand of thread that you are buying for dyeing?
Oh, so it's kind of all over the place. But basically it's either pearl cotton, and I think it's size 8 and 10. 12 is pretty fine. So the way the numbers work in cotton thread is the smaller the number, the bigger the thread size. And it's really easy to get. It's a little finicky to dye, but with a little patience, you'll get good at it. But I usually use size 10 crocheters cotton and then I think size 10 pearl cotton. And then if I can ever get vintage, I buy that because what I've found is older thread has less energy in it. And what I mean is like that twist. And so as you're dyeing and washing, what happens is that twist just goes pew, and you get all these crazy little curly cues and stuff. And like you snap for like 5 minutes. And when you're trying to wind your skein back up, it just gets, not always, but it gets tangled. I've learned a lot of things and like throughout, and I have it'll sound funny. I bought like these bra washers, like they're sort of plastic and structured and mesh. And because if you just throw a skein of thread in the washing machine, it will turn into a giant spaghetti mess. And you can just use garment bags too, small garment bags. But yeah, I put them in there and I run them through the washing machine, and I actually do put them in the dryer for a little bit because I don't want them to shrink and I want to make sure I get any of the excess dye out. But that's my professional tip. if you're gonna dye thread, and you have to soak it for a really long time because it takes a lot to get all the water. And when you're mordanting, it's the same. Like you want to definitely do the full 4 hour, or not, well, I do 4 hours because I do the tannin and the aluminum acetate. But if you're going to do it, you have to soak and leave it in the dye bath for a while.
All right. That is.
Oh, and you can use embroidery floss too. Embroidery,
Yep.
anything cotton is just like, it's fabulous.
Right. So let's see, what is the name of that blanket stitch looking stitch?
Oh, so I call it the spiderweb stitch, but it is technically the tambourine stitch. But when I looked up tambourine stitch, I could not find it anywhere. And I originally saw it, I'm probably going to say her name wrong, but it's Wilhelmina, I think DeVry or DeVille. She's incredible. She does all kinds of just like really cool stuff. But she had done a little article in Salvage Magazine that I saw that had a little drawing that I was like, this makes no sense. And I spent hours trying to figure it out. And then I figured it out and I was like, oh, this is like magic. And then I actually figured out a way to simplify it. So if you're on Instagram, there are a multitude of tutorials saved in Spiderweb Pouch series. That's all step by step on how to do it. And if you're not on Instagram, I am working on getting everything up on YouTube, but it's not there yet.
Yeah, it's good. I know I realized when you said you were on at 4 Pacific, because I always catch you at 7 Eastern. And
Yeah.
I'll be, it's after dinner, I'm just wrapping up emails, and all of a sudden I just see close up of your hands doing the stitch, and it's so peaceful just watching you do it. So I mean, for the person who's asking that, you can really see Heidi doing that stitch a lot and how she does it, and it's very meditative.
This is my favorite stitch, especially if you're like super anxious. It's like, boom. You're like, oh yay, the world's a better place now. Not really, but I don't care. I have an hour break where everything is beautiful.
Just for 1 hour.
Mhm.
All right. So what Renee is asking, what mordants are you using?
The gallotannin and the aluminum acetate. And I'm using aluminum acetate because I'm doing cellulose fibers. And even the silk, I do that because I don't want to mess with a second mordant vat. But if you're not doing cellulose fibers, you can just use, I think it's aluminum potassium sulfate. But and if you have access to oak galls, you can use those, but they're going to impart kind of a champagne-y, yellowy color, where the gallo, it doesn't impart color. So you get like pure color with it.
Yeah. I'm assuming that Terry Van Sluwen lives near you, because Terry's asking, what is the name of the thrift store she talked about at the beginning?
Oh, Legacy. Yeah, Legacy. If there's a few, actually there's Scrap in San Francisco, which is giant. And actually one of my neighbor's moms started that. And I think there's a couple other ones in the country. I don't know if it's open right now. I know Legacy, I don't think they're open right now, but they do updates on their Facebook page.
I bet you like Goodwill,
Oh yeah.
When I go,
Yeah,
there's
I think
like bins of yarn and stuff. It's one of those things you never look at unless we're listening to you and like, oh yeah, I should go and check
Yeah.
out thread and dye it, get it for 99 cents or 50 cents there.
Yep. And that stuff works better anyway because it's older.
Oh, Breeze Honeycutt. Okay.
Yay! She just made some pouches and they were so pretty.
Oh, it gets inspired quickly and then puts us all to shame by doing the thing we do on Feedback Friday. Like, look, I made paper finally. I mean, suddenly. So what are your tools of the trade? Meaning, where do you get those long needles and your thimbles?
Oh, yes.
Ring that you wear to push the needle through.
Yes. So that's probably another one of those like super asked a lot questions. The hoop that I use is from Morgan Hoops. I have a vintage hoop from Marie Products. You have to search on eBay. I got it at the thrift store for $7. You cannot find them for $7. They're like $50. But you can find them. But yeah, the hoop stand I use, which I highly recommend because it really helps with hand fatigue. And you can sit on your couch and binge watch television. Yeah, so Morgan Hoops for their combo lap stand. The little silicone, the blue ones are little silicone, I think they call them thread pullers, but also guitarists use them for finger picking because they protect your fingertips. You can just do a Google search. There's like lots of places that have them. And then the green thimble, because I was super anti-thimble and I hated them, but it was mostly because I hadn't found a good thimble. And that is a Dritz Soft Comfort thimble. I also have another one that's metal, that's I think just called an open back thimble that is good if you have fingernails. I don't have fingernails, but that was sort of the first metal thimble that I found that I liked. So if you would rather have a metal thimble, I think it's just called an open back thimble and it's adjustable and it's great. It kind of looks like your finger has armor on it. But and the long needles, I have a variety of needles that I use. Tulip has the longest, and they're supposed to be unbendable, but I have bent them, but I also use them a lot. Clover has, I think they're called large is their long size, and those are also really, really good. And then I think I have some Olympia, and there's like another brand, but the tulip and the clover are what I use the most. And in my mending kits, I do the clover ones, just because they're like a nice size. They're not too long, not too short.
Right. I forgot you got those really cute mending kits, and we'll definitely put a link to them too. So, hey, Suzanne, is Mordented Fabric, is Mordented Fabric, does it always have to be washed and dried first?
Oh, no. So when you're mordanting your fabric, you definitely should, well, it depends on what you're going to use it for, but I mean, you have to wash it. You need to scour it. And you can even do a test. I've done a test. The difference in the color that goes into it and that actually stays in it and lasts is like night and day. If you don't scour or soak your fabric before you mordant it, and before you don't want to wash it again after you mordant it. Once you mordant it, it's done. You let it dry, you can store it, you can use it right away. But then like after you dye it, you wanna wash it. And I just wash and dry everything because I want whatever I end up with, I want it to be what it's going to be. Like hand washing, I always feel like there's residual dye, and I don't want people to get fabric from me like in the mending kits or in the botanical fabric bundles. I don't want it to run on them. So yeah, that's why I do that. But you have to scour. You have to. Otherwise you will lose all your color.
You could always like make mistakes and see what happens when you don't scour, which, being an amateur myself, like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't always want to do it either. And I don't always want to mordant or do like the long, like the 4-hour mordant, but man, you need to make yourself a cup of tea or promise that you'll get some cookies or something you really love afterwards so that you do it.
You can always, like you're saying, do it ahead of time too. I have, Kathy's always saying, you could do things ahead of time. I neatly fold and put my mordanted fabric away so that it's just a step I don't even have to think about when I'm ready, like, 5, 6 in the morning on a weekend, like I'm doing it.
I have a giant bin that I just sort of chuck things into.
All right. Well, Kathy, she's chucking things into something. So I think you're going to be
I'm a bin chucker too.
Oh,
yeah,
great.
I just
prove me wrong.
Both of us.
Yeah, big
folding.
Bin, throw it in there. I have one for non-mordanted. I have one for mordanted, and then I have one for clothes that I want to dye.
Yep.
Well, guess you guys are. I guess I'll start chucking things and not being so.
Folding. I mean, I fold them after they're dyed because they look so pretty, and I iron them. But yeah,
to each his own, Heidi.
To
each his own.
Yeah, you be you, Amy. You be you.
Okay, Kate Ellis, which part of the tree do you use most often?
Leaves. And if I'm gathering leaves, like I said, like the loquat leaves, I usually just clip off with my clippers. And you want to think about leaves, you're better off using the older leaves pretty much always. Like a lot of the young leaves just don't have color in them. And like if you're doing something like loquat, you don't want to take from the ends because that's where the blossoms and that's where the tree is growing. So it's the other reason why you want to use old leaves. Oh, the other thing, this is a total sidetrack. The loquat that I just dyed was all from rainwater that I gathered, which I'm pretty sure also affected the color. But yeah, I just try to get older leaves. If it's branches that are broken or branches that we've trimmed, I'll usually leave some of the softer pieces, but it's pretty much leaves. I have cherry bark that I wanted to do, but I never got around to it.
Okay. Okay. Is there a pattern for your dress?
No, there is not. So I don't do patterns for my cut and sew, but I have patterns for some of my knitted things. But I can say this, I have a massive collection of vintage patterns, but also as far as like modern accessible patterns, Fabric Store, which it's like Fabric Dash Store. It's down in LA. It's a great place to get linen. It's like they're so fabulous, but they have really nice patterns, and a lot of them are free. And then what is it? Merchant and Mills has some good ones. Although I actually have to say, I've had to adjust fit when I did one of theirs because it was so I couldn't even get it on because the shoulders, I was like, who has shoulders this small? But like, yeah, I think also Grain Line Studios is another good one. With just I'm just talking simple, because my stuff is really simple shapes. And so I would say those are some good places where you could find patterns that are similar, that you would enjoy wearing and enjoy sewing.
All right. So let's see, how do you suggest going about finding excess fabrics to make zero waste clothes? I think you kind of touched on it a bit. I mean,
Yeah,
and also going to
thrift stores. But and taking apart, like I have bought, I mean, one of the patterns I actually drafted ended up being I don't even think there was a tag in it, but it was this like little sleeveless A-line dress that I loved. And I took it apart and I made a pattern off of it. And I did these adjustments to like, make it. This is part of the other thing that I do is I try to make a garment that's going to fit a lot of people, and it's going to fit you differently. But so I do a lot of, I'll use a base pattern and like a garment that I have, and then I'll just adjust it so that, almost anybody can wear it.
Mm-hmm. See, hi Peggy. When you dye garments, do you have any tricks for getting even dye across the surface of the fabric?
I used to really try to do that. And now I think it's better sort of when it's not, but mostly it's making sure your garment's really, really, really soaked for a long time. Get your excess water out, but make sure you've done it evenly. And like squeeze it, and maybe let it sit and then shake it out. And then it's just stirring. Because the moment you let that garment sit on the bottom of the pot where it's hotter, you're going to get a flash mark, and the color is going to adhere faster there. And the color on the top, you're not going to get, it's going to be lighter. If you let something sit and it's bubbled out, it's not going to absorb dye. So a lot of it is just sitting there and stirring. And then the indigo, when I do that, I actually have a colander in the bottom to keep it off the stuff, the sediment. And that's just, and I do that in a 5-gallon bucket, and I just, it's a lot of put it in, let it sit, pull it out, flip it over, put it in, let it sit, flip it over, and then just sort of like look at it, because you can see the color building, and then it's just, it's just dipping. If you're doing lighter colors, it's a lot harder to get even if you're doing indigo, but yeah, stirring, or just like looking.
Okay, so what typical size of your fabric do you dye? What's the typical size of your fabric?
It varies. Right now I'm doing more like fat quarters, which is I think it's like 18 by like 20, or depends on the width of the fabric, because basically I'll just rip off a yard and then rip it into quarters. But otherwise they're the silk charmeuse is usually like 9 by something, because silk is expensive and I don't use it as much. But yeah, so it's anywhere from sort of like 9 by 6 or 9 by 9 to either anywhere from 15 to 18, by usually 18 to 20, somewhere around there. So they're smaller, just because it's easier. Like trying to do yardage, I did 5 yards of indigo once, and you have to have another person. Even a yard of fabric it's a lot. I mean, it's not a lot like if you're cutting it, but it's just a lot. It's a lot to dye at once. It's easier to do small pieces, and they're more fun. You can get more colors.
Heidi, I'm going to have to send you tons of questions because I see
Okay.
like 31 new messages underneath this one.
Oh, that's fine. I'll answer them.
gonna-
And you can
Okay.
always DM me on Instagram
Yes,
too. I'm
definitely.
good at answering questions, but I'm happy to.
How
Yeah.
about, yeah, how about if we go with this one? So Teddy, let's see. What time of year did you harvest loquat leaves? Did you mordant with alum acetate?
I do both with the loquat. I do non-mordant, and then you're gonna get softer peaches and pinks. But I actually did get some pretty strong like oranges without the. Well, they're less orange. They're more pink without mordant. But that you really want to extract it for several days. And if you do like the steeping method, like I do, I think Sasha Durr actually boils for 2 hours, and you can do that too. But I do it in the, or I should say I've only done it kind of January, sort of I think through April. But that's because I had so many other things that I needed to harvest at the time, because that sort of dictated when I was doing dye work. But now that I've sort of completed almost a full year of this, I can really go back and do more specific experiments and try some other things. So I'm going to do some loquat in the summertime too. I'm just guessing if it's drier, it takes longer. So depends on what your climate is. If you do it in the summertime compared to the wintertime. And then just, yeah, if they're blooming or they have fruit, just be really mindful of where you're taking your leaves.
Okay. I'm just
And use them within 3 days, 3 to
Yeah.
4 days.
I'm looking through all these questions. There's definitely a lot of good ones that I've just marked down. Marking from
And-
burn test down is what you're going to get.
Okay. And I have no idea what time it is. So
we are
Over?
at the end almost. So Heidi, thank you so much. That was fascinating, beautiful, and inspiring. And now I'm going to go walk around and make circular embroidery stitches. This is going to be
Yay.
exciting. So before we end and we will unmute for goodbyes, I just wanted to give you a few updates and also announce our next week's speaker. So we did just post our Turkey Red workshop. If you would like to time travel,
Yes.
back, a couple hundred years with Debbie Bamford of the Mulberry Dyer, please join us. It will be February 24th through 28th. It's, I believe it's either 3 or 4 hours a day because it actually was a 3-week process that we've been able to concentrate into a 5-day process. So both Debbie and her husband, John, will be leading that, and we'd love to see you participate. Also, we have some dye seeds on our website, and we decided that we would release them because we just needed to feel like we were going to start growing and moving forward. And yeah, you guys really like those. So we currently have 2 types of indigo, Safrukticosa from Madame Magar, and Persicaria, which we also call Japanese indigo, from Blue Light Junction. We have weld seeds from here in Washington State, and Hopi Black Sunflower that was grown on the ashram. We have some of those, and you are welcome to browse them. We have a fair amount of all these seeds. I didn't put so many packages online, but if it says that it's on back order, we do still have some that will create the seed packs for. Next week, we are so pleased to welcome Jordana Monk Martin, founder of the Tatter Library. So those of you who follow Tatter Blue on Instagram and this incredible research and library archive that Jordana established, she is going to be here. She's the former board president of the Textile Arts Center in Brooklyn, as well as the founder of its Artist in Residence program. She's just published a book called material cultures in conjunction with an exhibition she co-curated at Breek Arts Media in Brooklyn. I just can't wait to hear her story. I think it's going to be fascinating. She's actually kind of become the repository of several textile artists and researchers libraries. So her library space is growing and she's open to the public. You know, of course, COVID has made it kind of crazy, but she does, it is a public facing program. So can't wait and looking forward to that. Thank you again, everyone. Amy?
Yes, I have, Kathy, a couple people have asked about shipping seeds out of the country.
No, I cannot ship seeds
Yeah.
internationally. I'm sorry. In order to do that from the USDA, you have to have something called a phytosanitary certificate. And to get one and to get that certificate is extremely expensive. So we're not able to. What, you know, for those who are in Canada, a lot of you have US PO boxes that you use. And, you know, I wouldn't know if that's where you're getting it shipped to. So, but if you're in Europe or, you know, Central South America, Asia, we're not able to ship outside the country. The same with a lot of our dye flowers that we just, you know, you have to get them fumigated in order to export them. And I'm not willing to do that. Okay, sorry.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Heidi.
Heidi, it was wonderful. Thank you.
Loved
Thank you,
having
Heidi.
you.
All
Look
right.
glad everybody's happy.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank
Bye.
you, Heidi.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Thank
So
you.
good to see all of you.
Bye.
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 You.
Bye.
Bye.